Celine Voss woke up at 5 in the morning, just like she did every day. She did not use an alarm. She had not needed one in years. Something inside her always pulled her out of sleep before the sun came up, as if her body knew that the safest hours were the quiet ones, before the city opened its eyes. She swung her legs off the bed and sat still for a moment. The apartment was small, one window, one door, walls so thin she could hear her neighbor's television through them. But it was hers. She had paid for it with her own hands, her own money, her own name. Well, not her real name. But the name on the lease was hers now, and that was close enough. She walked to the kitchen counter, opened the small white bottle beside the coffee maker, and shook one pill into her palm. She stared at it for a second before swallowing it dry. She had been taking the pill every single morning for 6 years. It was not a vitamin. It was not medication for anything a human doctor would understand. It was a scent suppressant, something brewed in the back room of a black market apothecary on the edge of a wolf territory she had left behind long ago. One pill kept her smell locked inside her skin. One pill made her invisible to anything that hunted by nose. One pill kept her alive. She made coffee, got dressed in her work uniform, a dark green apron with the cafe's logo stitched on the chest, and stepped outside into the early morning air of Ashford City. The streets were nearly empty. A delivery truck rumbled past. A cat watched her from a window ledge. Celine pulled her jacket tighter and walked. She liked Ashford. It was big enough that no one paid attention to anyone else, and small enough that she knew every shortcut between her apartment and the cafe. She had built a life here the way someone builds a house with whatever materials they can find, not beautiful, not large, but solid. Dependable. Safe. She had been 18 when she ran. She did not let herself think about that night often. But sometimes, in the half-second between sleep and waking, it came back to her, the stone altar at the center of the moon's hard territory, the candles arranged in a circle, the elders in their dark robes, and the blade that had been laid out for her. She had been told her whole life that it was an honor. That her blood would seal a pact between two rival wolf clans and bring peace to the territories for a generation. That she should be grateful. She had not felt grateful. She had felt the cold air on her skin and the altar beneath her back, and she had made a decision in less than a heartbeat. She ran. She had not stopped running until she found Ashford, and then she had stopped, very deliberately, very carefully, and decided that this was where she would stay. The morning passed the way most mornings did. She made coffee and took orders and learned the names of the regulars. There was Gerald, who always asked for an extra shot and always forgot his card. There was the young woman with the red bicycle who ordered green tea and sat by the window for 2 hours every Tuesday. There was Mara, Celine's closest friend, and, if she was being honest, her only real friend, who worked the afternoon shift and always arrived 20 minutes early to sit at the counter and talk too loudly about everything she had watched on television the night before. "You look tired," Mara said that Tuesday, dropping her bag on the counter and stealing a cookie from the display without asking. She always did that. Celine never said anything about it. "I'm fine," Celine said. "You always say that." "Because I'm always fine." Mara looked at her with the particular expression she had, one eyebrow raised, mouth pulled to the side, that meant she did not believe a single word but was choosing not to push. It was one of the things Celine appreciated most about her. Mara had a great deal of curiosity and very good instincts about when to keep it to herself. "There's a market on Broad Street today," Mara said. "Come with me after your shift. They have those candles you like." Celine had not known she liked candles until Mara told her she did. That was another thing about Mara. She had a gift for noticing things about people that people had not yet noticed about themselves. "Fine," Celine said. 1 hour. The Broad Street Market was exactly the kind of place Celine normally avoided, crowded, loud, full of strangers pressing close together between the stalls. She kept her hands in her pockets and stayed a step behind Mara, letting her lead the way through the noise. They had been there for perhaps 20 minutes when Celine felt it. It was not a sound. It was not a smell. It was something older than both of those things, a pressure at the base of her spine, a sudden sharpening of every sense she had spent 6 years trying to dull. The back of her neck went cold. She turned. At the far end of the market lane, standing very still between a flower stall and a bread cart, was a wolf. Not a dog. Not an animal that had wandered in from somewhere. A wolf, massive, black-furred, with eyes the color of deep amber. It stood with its head low and its gaze fixed on exactly one thing. Her. Celine did not move for 3 full seconds. Her mind ran the calculation fast and without feeling. The scent suppressant had never failed before. She had never missed a dose. But the bottle had been sitting in her bag for 3 days before she had found a new supply, and there had been 4 mornings, just 4, where the dose had been half strength because she had been rationing. 4 mornings where the seal on her scent had been thin instead of solid. Apparently, that was enough. She knew what this wolf was. In the hierarchy of the wolf world, most wolves traveled in packs, within territories, under alphas. But the Alpha King's bonded wolf, the great black wolf that had run beside the Dre bloodline for 3 generations, did not stay in one place. It roamed. It searched. It was looking for something very specific, and it had been looking for a long time. A fated mate. The wolf took one slow step toward her. Celine grabbed Mara by the wrist. "We need to go," she said quietly. "What? Why?" "I haven't gotten the candles yet." "Mara." Her voice was very calm, the way it got when she was most frightened. "We need to go right now." They went. She spent the next 2 days barely sleeping, watching the street from her window. She doubled her dose of suppressant even though she knew, in the cold and logical part of her brain, that it was already too late. The wolf had seen her. The wolf had found her. What the wolf found, the king followed. She was still telling herself she had time when he walked into the cafe on a Thursday afternoon. He was tall, not unreasonably so, but tall in the way that made a room feel slightly smaller. He wore dark clothes, no jewelry, nothing that announced what he was to anyone who did not already know. His face was sharp and still, the kind of face that had learned not to show things. He had dark hair and eyes the same amber color as his wolf's, and he walked to the counter and sat down on a stool as if he sat at cafe counters every day of his life. He did not order anything. He just looked at her. "I know who you are," he said. His voice was quiet. Not threatening. Just certain. "You have the wrong person," Celine said. She did not stop wiping down the counter. Celine. Daughter of Pack Alpha Edric Voss, Moon's Hard Territory. Disappeared 6 years ago, the night before the binding ritual. He paused. "I have been looking for you for 2 years. "Then you wasted 2 years, she said. "I don't know anyone by that name." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "My wolf sat outside this cafe for 36 hours before I arrived." He would not move. He has never done that before, in his entire life. Another pause. "You are my fated mate." Celine set the cloth down on the counter very carefully. She looked at him directly for the first time since he had come in. "I don't care," she said, "what your wolf did. I am not going anywhere with you. I have a job. I have an apartment. I have a life. And I am asking you, very politely, to leave." He looked at her for a long moment. Then, to her complete surprise, he stood up, straightened his jacket, and left. She stared at the door for a full minute after it closed. His name was Selim Dre, and he did not leave Ashford. He took a room at the hotel 3 streets away. He sent no one to watch her, or at least no one she could find, and he did not return to the cafe. But she knew he was still there because his wolf sat at the end of her street every evening at dusk, patient and enormous and completely unbothered by the people who stopped to stare at it from a careful distance. On the 5th day, one of his enforcers came to the cafe instead. A woman, steady-eyed and professional, who sat down and told Celine, in a very measured tone, that Elder Varro of the Moon's Hard Territory had sent trackers into Ashford 3 days ago. That the blood pact Celine's disappearance had broken was still destabilizing 2 wolf territories. That Varro intended to finish what he had started 6 years ago, by any means available to him. "Selim is not asking you to be anything you are not," the enforcer said. "He is asking you to let us protect you until this is resolved." "He is asking me to go back into the world I spent 6 years getting out of," Celine said. "Yes," the enforcer said simply. "Because that world has come here." That night, Celine looked at her small apartment, the plants she had grown on the windowsill, the book stacked beside the bed, the coffee mug Mara had given her with a joke painted on the side, and understood, for the first time, that she had not actually escaped anything. She had only delayed it. She had spent 6 years building a life in a place she never planned to stay, and now it was asking her what she intended to do about that. She packed one bag. She left a note for the building manager. And then she went and knocked on the door of the hotel on the 3rd Street. The road to the Dre stronghold took most of a day. Celine sat in the back of a large, dark vehicle between two of Selim's enforcers and said almost nothing. Selim sat in the front. Occasionally he turned to check on her, not speaking, just looking, and she looked back at him with an expression she had spent years perfecting, flat, unreadable, revealing nothing. But the mate Bond was not interested in what her face was doing. It was a strange and inconvenient thing, the Bond. She had known about it her whole life, everyone in the wolf world did, but she had never felt it before. It was not loud. It was not overwhelming. It was more like suddenly noticing that a door in a room had always been there, and that there was warmth on the other side of it. She felt his moods in small ways, a tightening when he was concerned, something lighter and harder to name when he glanced back at her. She kept her eyes on the window and her hands in her lap and said nothing about any of it. She was fairly sure he felt it too. They arrived at the stronghold as the sun went down. It was large and old and built into the side of a ridge, surrounded by trees so tall they blocked the sky at the edges. Celine stood in the courtyard and breathed in the air, pine and cold earth and something ancient, and felt her wolf, buried deep under 6 years of suppressance and silence, move for the first time. Just a small movement. Like something turning over in sleep. She pressed it back down and followed Selim inside. On the second night at the stronghold, Mara disappeared. Celine woke to the sound of one of the enforcers outside her door, and she knew before the woman finished speaking. A message had come through one of the territory channels. Mara had been taken from her apartment in Ashford. Elder Varro was offering a trade, Celine, willing, at the ritual site before the next full moon, or the human would be harmed. Celine sat with this information for a long time. She sat with it while Selim's enforcers argued routes and strategies in the next room. She sat with it while Selim himself came to her door and stood in the doorway without speaking for a moment, and then said, carefully, "We will find another way." "There is no other way," Celine said. "He wants me. He will not release her until he has me." "You are not going alone." "I did not say alone." She looked at him. "I said there is no other way." "That is different." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded once. "We leave at first light." She had expected him to argue. She had expected him to tell her it was too dangerous, that she should stay behind, that his people would handle it. He did not say any of those things, and she found, to her own irritation, that this made her trust him slightly more than before. The moon's hard ritual grounds were in a valley 2 territories east, a place Celine had not seen since she was 18 years old. She had told herself, over 6 years of small and careful living, that she did not remember exactly what it looked like. She had been wrong. Every stone of it was in her memory as clearly as if she had been there yesterday. The carved entrance posts. The circle of flat ground. The altar at the center. Elder Varro stood beside it. He was older than she remembered, thinner, with something sharp and frightened at the edges of his eyes that had not been there before. Mara was to his left, hands bound, unhurt but pale. 6 enforcers stood in a line behind him. Celine stepped into the clearing. Selim and his people were in the trees, waiting for her signal. She had asked them for 3 minutes. Just 3 minutes alone with the elder. "I wondered if you would actually come," Varro said. His voice was the same as she remembered it. Smooth and certain, like someone who had never once doubted that the world would arrange itself according to his preferences. "Let her go," Celine said. "This is between you and me." "And so it is. As it always should have been." He stepped forward. "You broke a pact that held this region together for 40 years. 2 clans have been at the edge of war since the night you ran. All of that ends tonight." "All of that ends tonight," Celine agreed. "Just not the way you planned." She had not fully understood, until this moment, what was in her blood. She had known, in the way children know things they have been told but do not yet feel, that the Voss bloodline carried something unusual. Not strength, plenty of wolves had strength. Something older. The Moon's hard pack had been, 3 generations back, a line of pact binders. People who could make agreements between clans seal them in a way that lasted. But what could be sealed could also be broken. She had been brought to that altar at 18 to add her blood to a pact. No one had ever told her she could also dissolve one simply by choosing to. She raised her hand, and she said the old words, not the ones Varro used, not the binding words, but the ones her mother had whispered to her when she was very small, before anyone had decided what she was going to be used for. The releasing words. The ones that said, this agreement is no longer held. This debt is cleared. This bond between clans is ended by the one who carried it. The air in the clearing shifted. Varro went very still. Then his face changed, the certainty drained out of it, replaced by something she had never seen on him before. Fear. That is not possible, he said. And yet, Selene said. She gave the signal. Selim and his enforcers stepped out of the trees. What followed was not pleasant and she would not remember all of it clearly afterward, but it was over quickly. Varro's enforcers stood down when they understood what they were facing. Varro himself was restrained without resistance, he seemed, more than anything, stunned. Like a man who had built his entire life on a wall and watched it turn to dust. Mara was cut free. She ran to Selene and held on to her with both arms, trembling. What, Mara said, her voice muffled against Selene's shoulder, is happening? I will explain later, Selene said. You said that about the wolf. I will explain everything later. Mara went home to Ashford the next morning, escorted by 2 of Selim's people and carrying a story she would spend months trying to find the right words for. Elder Varro was removed from his position and taken before the Council of the 5 Territories. The blood pact was officially dissolved, acknowledged as void. The 2 clans it had tied together received separate settlements, ones that did not require anyone's blood on an altar. Selene stood at the border of the Dray territory 3 days later, in the early morning light, with her one bag over her shoulder. The trees were tall. The air was cold and clean and smelled of pine. Selim stood a few feet away, watching her with those amber eyes that she had, over the past 2 weeks, quietly stopped resenting. You could stay, he said. Not a command. Not a plea. Just a fact, offered simply. I know, she said. I am not asking you to be anything you decided not to be. I am not asking for anything. He paused. The stronghold has a room that looks out over the ridge. I think you would like it. She looked at him for a long moment. She thought about the small apartment in Ashford, the windowsill plants, the books, the joke mug. She thought about 6 years of mornings with 1 pill and a lockdown scent and a name that was not quite hers. She thought about the wolf inside her that had turned over in its sleep the first night she arrived here, and had not gone quiet again since. She had spent a very long time running from a fate that had been handed to her without her consent. That had been the right choice. The ritual, the altar, the blood pact, none of that had been hers to carry. But this was different. This was a door, and no one was pushing her through it. She picked up her bag, walked to where Selim stood, and stepped across the border into the Dray territory. She did not look back. Behind her, somewhere in the trees, a large black wolf made a sound that was not quite a howl, something softer, and satisfied, and then it was quiet, and the morning opened up ahead of her like something she had not yet decided the shape of. She found, for the first time in 6 years, that she was not afraid of that.